tell me a little bit about yourself and your upbringing?
Well, I am an autistic adult, but I grew up in Mexico. I grew up in a beautiful small little beach city in La Baja called La Paz, and my parents are from there. Well, my mom is from here, but she also grew up there too. And when there was a crisis started getting, hitting, there was some changes and stuff, and I was like a couple months away from being 18. So my transition over here was really, really hard. I'm going to be talking about all the details on my channel because it's a long, long story. But it was really tough. It was really tough moving over here because I was supposed to do my last semester or my last, because they thought, well, they can, put you back a 6 months. And so my last year or at least 2 years of high school, I wanted to finish them here. That's why they brought me. That's why they didn't let me finish high school over there, because they could have left me over there with my grandma. They could have let me and helped me, I would have much rather finished my high school over there. But I was already dealing with depression. Like depression had already started. I started dealing with it when I was 16. So it was an incredibly tough journey for me to leave everything that I knew and start all over again. Although it was always in my plans to come to the U.S. and study film. That idea I always had it since I was like a little girl, like 6 years old or something. I just got it in my head, like, I want to make movies. I want to be a movie director. People thought I was crazy, but I was like, yeah, she'll grow out of it. I didn't. Where did they teach that? Well, I have an uncle, actually. He's a famous director. But so I thought, I was like, well, I'm going to, go where my uncle lives, and just gonna, look for a school there. They have to teach it somewhere over there. Like I thought, like there was no Google at the time, so I just imagined there has to be a school where they teach a film because it's Hollywood. So I'm gonna go to Hollywood, and yeah, that was my goal. But I got sidetracked from it for many years because of depression. Depression led me to drugs and a bunch of stuff. So transitioning in the middle of, I had already started with depression. I already started experimenting with drugs, but it wasn't nothing serious. It was more like a rebellious thing. It was just a rebellious kind of like, phase that I was going through. I was like, I want to be a bad girl. I wanted to, not care about, rules or anything or what my parents said. Like I wanted to do the complete opposite from whatever my parents would tell me. Especially it was a rebellion against my dad. And so I started like that, and I started kind of like, so I was a late bloomer, of course. All my friends started acting like teenagers at 14 and stuff like that. I started acting like a teenager at 16, kind of, but I started kind of want to get curious about like, okay, let's see why, let's see what parties are all about, and let's see. But it was more like, because I would have, honestly, if my parents would have been like super like, not hard on me and then would have just kind of like give me everything I wanted and stuff like that, I would have probably never wanted to go against them. Like it would have always been in good terms that I would have probably been like, oh yeah, I don't need to smoke, I don't need to drink, I don't need parties, I get sleepy on them anyway. So I was never like that. I was very cringy when I was little. So I love watching cartoons and just being at home and eating, and that's all I like to do. It wasn't something that I liked doing. I just wanted to do it for the sake of like, I'm a rebel. Like that was my mission. And then we moved to the U.S. So my dad's business went down. So I think that's what kind of like made my depression a little bit bigger, because my dad was so stressed that he would just put all his stress on me, and that just kind of like made my life a lot harder and make all the confusions that one goes through when you're a teenager just kind of made it very just intense, and nothing made sense. So I wanted to move. When we decided, Mom said, like, you know what, let's try kind of like moving, start fresh, just change of air, different life in the U.S. I have a friend over there, and she said she'll like help us out if we. My mom had to come here first and get a job and everything. So my dad was just very difficult, the time that he was over there. So when we finally moved over here, a bunch of stuff happened. bunch of stuff happened in between. Finally, I moved over here, and when we moved here, we moved to this neighborhood where like nobody wanted to rent to my mom because she didn't have credit. So she could only rent in certain areas, and those areas in the valley were like the, well, I don't know if the worst, because actually the place didn't look bad at sight, but I think like most areas in the valley are bad. So yeah, it was just one of those areas where like there was a bunch of like really bad people living in that area. And so it was really hard. I got jumped by 6 girls just within the first couple of weeks or 3 weeks or something. Like, yeah, like one of the girls didn't like the way I looked at them, and her and her friends like literally beat me up, like literally hit me, kicked me, everything. It was just kind of like very, very intense for me, because I never thought I would go through something like that. I came from this really, small city where everybody was so nice to each other. There was no crime where I come from. Everyone was so like, actually the more humble you were, the nicer you were in my city. So it was really weird to me to be like, oh, my own, these Mexican girls, literally, or Hispanic or whatever they were, but I think they're Mexican. They just jumped me and started beating me. I'm like, wow, that's not what what I'm used to in Mexico. That's seems like we're different, feel like we're coming from different countries, because I guess, Hispanic people here are not very nice. I thought that was my idea off the bat. And then the other sad thing that happened to me was that I tried to join high school, and then they had this really weird rule that if you were about to be 18, you couldn't start high school. So that just kind of like, yeah, it was a horror deal. It was really hard for me to be able to join high school. I went through all these, like, it was the information, the system was terrible. There was no guiding, nothing. Wasted 2 years of my life just finding a way, so how could I get my high school diploma? It was so ridiculous. Finally, I found out by luck through a friend that I could start going to community college just for being 18 years old. And I'm like, that makes no sense. But I'm like, that makes no sense. And not being able to finish high school also doesn't make sense. Like, what the hell? But okay. So yeah, that's how I, started. But that's how it's been, a big chunk of my life that marked me a lot. And it was a big, cut in the middle of my life. And then me finding out about ADHD, about autism and stuff. I mean, well, Asperger's at that time. And then having really strict parents along the way. So my upbringing, I guess, my answer to that, my upbringing was pretty good when I was little. Like, I had a really nice life. My parents, they started from the bottom, actually. They got married young and then they were in school, but they kind of like dropped out. Well, my dad almost finished, pretty much. He pretty much finished. I think he just didn't get there's a different process in Mexico to finish, to get your title. But my dad did finish. My mom didn't. She dropped out. So they kind of started from the bottom, and they built a business, and they picked up pretty fast. They did good. So I was always in private school. I was always, they took me to Disneyland every year up until I was like 7 or 8. And everything was good. My mom took me to parties, like the whole, like, very common average thing, except that, and I always have friends, like friends I made more friends in my community than in school, because school's more like, even as little kids, there's still little politics. I'm like, oh, don't talk to this person. But I never felt like I had trouble making friends. Like, I never felt like that. But I did feel, it's a very long story. It was just very different. I will get in trouble for the most weird things, and kids will make me sometimes like get in trouble, like, hey, do this, da da da, and I will go ahead and do it because it will tell me. So I was very naive, and they could trick me into doing things like that. So it was just, I always felt different, and I always noticed that my treatment was different. But you know what? Kids are a lot less. They can be very mean to a certain extent, but adults are worse. As I can say, teenagers and adults are a lot worse. So the worst case scenarios that a kid does not compare how all the horrible things I went through as a teenager, as an adult, it was a lot worse. So if anything, my childhood, I remember nothing but good things. If I had any bad experiences, I think most likely I blocked them for the most part. And yeah, other than that, I think I do remember one thing that I remember when I was little was that I wanted to run away from home. That one thing I do remember writing in my diary. I just think that I just never liked the way my dad was. Never liked the way, like I like the idea of having a family whole, but many times I just didn't feel like my parents could understand me. I didn't feel like my parents were good parents. They still sort of are good parents, but to me they were not. So I always wanted to run away from home, and I just kind of like never felt completely like understood by my parents. But now that I look things into perspective and stuff, I think, I mean, yeah, it would have been ideal to have like a little less strict parents or whatever, but uh, one can get used to a situation. It wasn't like horrible. Like there's kids that literally get, tortured and beaten, and nothing good ever comes for them, from their parents. Like I had a really good kid, except that I mean a really good life, everything I wanted. I had clothing, food. I would have like weekends with whatever. If I wanted to go to the movies, whatever I want to do, I would do. But I just kind of felt that my dad's idea of like punishment was a little too overboard, and that kind of like it affected me because my dad didn't know how to talk to me and explain why I was in trouble. And that's one of the biggest issues. I just always felt like I was in trouble and I never knew why. So that's one thing I'm never going to do to my children. I always want to make sure when I punish them, because definitely reprimanding your kids is important. I know parents that never freaking reprimand their kids, and I feel like that's just not a good lesson to teach them, because in life, when you do wrong things, maybe to you it's not that big of a deal, but it's important to understand that how your actions can hurt other people. So anything that you do wrong, there's going to be consequences. Obviously, if you break the law or something, or do something really bad, like there's going to be consequences. So you need to teach that to your kids at a young age, so they have the conscience of that, so they don't have to go ahead and experience it as adults, or go as jerks and be like, oh, mom is going to bail me out of this, or which a lot of people do with their kids. Yeah, it's a clash. It's a clash for me, because I come from that world where like everything costs so much, and I was brought up that way. So now everything that I earn, I appreciate, I worship it, but a lot of people don't. And there's too many clashes of cultures here, too many clashes. And in Mexico wasn't like that. It was like everyone was Mexican. Everyone was the same. There was rich and poor and middle class, but there was no real difference in mentality. You could see some Asian people there, but they would still hang around other Mexicans. They wouldn't just hang around with themselves and act differently. Maybe their parents were, but you understood, like, it's like, oh, well, they're from there, they're different. But their kids that they were brought up there, they acted like everyone else. They got along with everyone else. There was no Asian secluded group, and there was no seclusion on like races and cultures. Like, you come to this culture, you become part of this culture. And that's what I was used to my entire life. So coming here and having to kind of like, I don't belong to the Mexican culture from here, because it's so different. I've always been looking for my community, right? And part of me was kind of thinking, well, maybe because I'm Asperger's, I thought that's why I'm different. So I seek that community, and I'm like, I want to start my YouTube channel, and I started getting more into the community. Once I started it, I got excited, but then I came to learn that even the autistic community is very, very divided with different beliefs. Some people believing it needs to be cured. Some other people believing it's a disability, and that everyone should see it that way. And then some other people believing that no, it's not a disability. It's actually, you have other abilities that a lot of neurotypicals can do, and this kind of like the what's called the geek syndrome or something. There's like a lot. There's the that side that thinks like, hey, we actually have all these abilities and we can do all these things. So there's a lot of, engineers that are, like really good because they're autistic or because they're Asperger's. But then you have the contrary to that group thinking, oh, no, those people right there, they think they're better than the rest on the spectrum. So just kind of like, why do you gotta see it like that? It just kind of feels weird because like I go into social media and I never know who am I gonna come across. And you think like, hey, oh, you're neurodivergent, or you have a neurodivergent page, or your autistic page. Oh, me too. Like we're the same. And they just sound like, no, we're not. We're not even the same at all. Like you hate people like me, so it's just really hard, really hard to be like, you never know who you're gonna, who are you gonna run into in these. It's so stressful. I just wish that people just be less complicated and just accept each other for whatever they are, for whatever it is. Life is so short. Life is so short. This world, I don't even know if it's gonna be, it's gonna survive another 30 years, to be honest. We're over here fighting for, stupid things. Let's start with the little things. Let's start with not criticizing each other, treating each other like, like you would like others to treat you, right? Might not always work, but it's a good way. It's a good guide to be like, hey, treat others just fairly, and that's it. Like, don't. I think most of us don't expect special treatment. Some people do, but most of us don't really expect special treatment. But also don't expect like to be treated like less than. So there's those people that say like, oh yeah, like they claim like they fight for the rights of whatever they think they're fighting, but then they're attacking somebody else so like you're by you being critical and attacking a different group, you're acting the same. You're doing the same thing.
How well do you feel?
You put down the phone.